Good afternoon. Let's do some business. We are doing it live right here, weekday afternoons at 4 o'clock. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money, live on the air right here, 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Well, stocks finishing closer to reclaiming record territory today with the Dow moving higher for the seventh session in a row. Looks like optimism around a possible Fed interest rate cut, boosting not only the Dow but also small cap stocks today. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of 331 points. The S&P 500 moved up 26, and the NASDAQ composite moved up 43 points. We see the Dow now less than about 1% off its March 28th record close, while the S&P 500 less than 1% of its own record close set that same day. The NASDAQ ended just about 0.6% off its April 11th record high close. So we are watching, we're on, once again, record watch here on Wall Street as the market has had a pretty decent rally lately. Nervous time in the Middle East, though, with oil futures finishing higher today, building on the gains seen the previous session. Also boosting the price of oil, an unexpected drop in last week's crude oil supply numbers. The weakness in domestic gas demand raised concerns over the outlook for the market. We see the price of oil moving higher by 27 cents to $79.26 a barrel in New York, and Brent crude in London, the global benchmark, moving up 30 cents to $83.88 a barrel. We continue to monitor the headlines out of the Middle East, also concerns about what's happening at university campuses around the world. Another encampment at Chapman University in Orange County. I'll talk to one of the Jewish students there who feels threatened by what's happening there at Chapman. That'll be coming up later this hour. We're coming to you a day after the Milken Institute Global Conference wrapped up in Beverly Hills, which attracted about 4,000 movers and shakers from around the world, leaders in business, government, spanning the political spectrum, health, finance, technology, philanthropy, media, and the list goes on. We will be speaking to one of the top people at that conference later this hour. I'll be speaking to prominent Los Angeles attorney Richard Sandler, the former chairman of the Jewish Federations of North America in Los Angeles. He also serves as vice president of the Milken Family Foundation and author of the new book, Witness to a Prosecution, The Myth of Michael Milken. He moderated several panels at the conference, and Richard Sandler will be joining us to talk about the book and about Michael Milken. And I think you'll find it very, very interesting. He'll be joining us live later this hour. But first, on your money, the markets, and the economy. Joining us live now, the one and only Ben Stein for our occasional Frank and Stein conversation. Yep, Ben Stein, of course, a financial and political commentator, actor too, famous for the scene in Ferris Bueller's Day Off where he gave that lecture as the economics professor, basically improvising the whole thing in one of the most famous scenes in American cinema. Also an attorney, as well as author of many, many books. And Ben Stein is on the line for Frank and Stein this afternoon. Ben, thank you very much for taking the call here today.
My honor, my dear friend. My pleasure, and my honor.
We're elated to have you with us every time. Thank you very much, and we love you out there. And let me ask you, of course, we're watching what's happening with this trial. If you can put your legal hat on right off the bat here. You may have seen that political cartoon that shows the courtroom scene saying we need to restore decorum in the courtroom. Now bring in the porn star. Give us your reaction to what's happening with this trial going on.
That's very funny. Well, this trial should never have happened. I mean, this was a political prosecution. This was a Stalinist show trial. There's never any reason for this case to have been brought except by left-wingers to try to destroy the leading Republican candidate. And I might add, it is a prosecution so out of bounds in terms of what the Constitution requires to elect a president that I believe it is a very serious attack on the Constitution itself. I mean, this man, Mr. Trump, far from an ideal human being, but obviously a very successful human being, is being tried essentially to destroy the leading Republican candidate. And I don't think that's the way the Constitution reads. There's Article 1, Article 2, Article 3 about electing a president, electing a Congress, having a judiciary. Nothing says, and the Constitution says, and if any tin pot prosecutor from out of nowhere wants to bring in a candidate for president and get a group of jurors to say that he committed some crime, that prosecutor can do it, and thereby turn the process upside down. And that's just nowhere in the Constitution. That's A. B. What Mr. Trump is alleged to have done, that's to say, have an affair with a porn star. Well, it's unfortunate. I'm happy to say that although I've committed many, many crimes in my life, mostly having to do with overeating, that's not a crime that the law executes unless there's a political motive. And then having a judge, prosecutor, jurors, all of the party that is opposed to Mr. Trump, that's all just a bunch of ways of subverting the political process.
On the line with Ben Stein, and of course, then the gag order also imposed and a threat of prison if he doesn't abide by this. Put your legal scholar hat on and give your analysis of that one.
Outrageous! It's just a thorough outrage to say that a man or woman, anything, transsexual, anything they want in a trial, cannot speak about the trial without risking going to prison. That's unheard of. I don't think it's ever happened before in a political case. And it's just the continuation of the left-wingers' attempt to demolish the Constitution. I don't think there's anybody who has spent a minute in law school with really decent professors who doesn't think there's something deeply subversive of the Constitution involved in this case. And God bless Stormy Daniels. It's wonderful that she can make a good living doing something that I guess just comes naturally to her. But it's a crime. It's a crime against the Constitution. What the prosecutors are doing, what the judge is doing. That judge shouldn't be there, by the way. That judge is very far from an impartial judge, as far as I'm aware. Maybe I've made a mistake somewhere. Let's just face it. This case is a political Stalinist trial to try to knock out a candidate.
All of this going on with the serious geopolitical stuff happening was a big focus of discussion at the Milken Institute Global Conference this week. People were asking for you, by the way. They know you're on this show, and you have a lot of friends who attended there, and so they were asking for you, Ben Stein. What about what's going on at the university campuses? I'll be speaking to one of the students at Chapman here coming up, where they've also set an encampment there, as well as other places. And we've seen what's been happening at UCLA, for example, and back east at Columbia and so forth. Give us your thoughts about that big story this week.
Well, I think it's outrageous that people are being kept from going to class, and professors are being kept from teaching their students. I think that the demolition of the free speech part of the Constitution is happening right before our eyes. People who want to speak their minds about what Israel is and what Jews are being, some are being encouraged. If they're anti-Jewish or anti-Israel, they're being encouraged. If they're pro-Israel and pro-Jewish, they're not being allowed to speak. And again, we are moving steadily towards a more communist, Bolshevist, anti-freedom America, and it's really, really heartbreaking, and as my wife would say, heart-rendering. And it's just horrible. And what the universities are doing in terms of allowing these students to act like thugs and bullies is very worrisome. You and I have talked about this before. I've had the great pleasure of talking to you a number of times. When Hitler was moving towards power in Germany, he did not have that big a political operation, and he didn't have any very detailed plans for what he was going to do with Germany. But what he had was a huge group, hundreds of thousands and later millions, of thugs and toughs and street bullies called the Sturmabteilung, the SA. And he had them go around beating up anybody who spoke critically of Hitler. And so that was sort of a precursor to what's going on in America's campuses. The students cannot really have any serious gripe about Israel or about American Jews. I mean, the Hamas attacked a group of Jewish youth, killed 1,200 or so of them. There were so many rapes they couldn't even count them. They murdered hundreds of women, or I shouldn't say hundreds, at least dozens of women by applying blowtorches to their genitals, and bragged about it. Took pictures of it and sent it around on the internet. And now they're complaining that Jews are unhappy about that. I mean, this is absolutely incredible. It's mind-boggling that we have a president of the United States who is sympathetic to the people who did that.
On the Live with Ben Stein, and let's not forget what happened on October 7th, and anyone who drives by the Beverly Hills sign there on Santa Monica Boulevard with that dramatic flag display showing the flags there representing all the people who were killed back on October 7th, Israeli flags as well as American flags, by the way, and flags of other nationalities. People on Santa Monica Boulevard see that very dramatic display there to this day as a reminder of what happened back on October 7th and what started this war to begin with. What about Ukraine and Russia? We've seen mixed reports there, Ben Stein, and the unthinkable happened there, too, the last couple of years. What do you see happening there?
Well, Ukraine was given its independence as a country by the communists. I mean, when the communists broke up the Soviet Union, they had a list of republics that they had subjugated, and they were under the subjugation of Russia, USSR, and one of those that was freed was Ukraine. And but Putin decided that no, he didn't want that. He wanted to change his mind. He was going to invade Ukraine and subjugate them. And when he did subjugate an area of the Ukraine, which is a big area, he killed, raped hundreds, thousands of civilians, and buried the women. His favorite trick, this seems to be a favorite Russian thing to do, was to bury the women alive.
What's up, everyone? It's Reality Steve, your number one source for all things Bachelor Nation and reality TV. Every day, I'm giving you the behind-the-scenes juice and your info on all your Bachelor Nation stories, and also interviewing some of your favorite reality stars. My name has been synonymous with spoilers, but I'm so much more than that. Give me a listen.
The Reality Steve Podcast, part of the Believe Network. Just search BLEAV on YouTube or wherever you listen.
And we're now we have stood up to the Russians wonderfully. I have to say that's an incredibly great thing America has done. But let's not stop doing it. I mean, let's remember the Ukrainians are incredibly brave people. They're standing up to one of the foremost military powers in the world, and they are doing it with great ingenuity and courage. And we've given them a great deal of money, but we have a great deal of money. And to have somebody who will stand up for freedom and decency, well, that's just miraculously wonderful.
On the line with Ben Stein for our Frankenstein conversation here, zooming out to the economy and the markets, what's the stock market seeing that most Americans aren't feeling right now? That we're near record highs for the stock market here, and obviously a lot of concerns about still inflation and even the job market lately with weaker than expected numbers that came out not too long ago. What do you see on the economic front here, sir?
Well, the economy is doing what we would expect the economy to do. The Federal Reserve has been flooding the country with money, and it has been predicted since the days of Adam Smith, the originator of the exegesis of free markets, that would happen. That if we had an economy that's flooded with money, that prices would go up, but the industrial activity would go up, and that's what we're seeing. I think it's a very hard gig for people who are suffering from inflation. It's a terribly hard gig for people who are wanting to buy houses or condos. I think we're seeing something that's not been seen in America before, which is a whole generation, maybe two generations, is now excluded from owning their own residences, and that's kind of sad because owning your own residence is probably as good an investment as there is. There's a fantastic capital gains advantage, there are tremendous tax advantages, but Mr. Biden, and I have to say it started Trump under Mr. Trump as well, have pretty much foreclosed that option by flooding America with money. And they've made the economy very rich and prosperous, but they've made it almost impossible for the ordinary citizen to own a home.
On the line with Ben Stein, and we heard from Neil Kashkari, the former Republican gubernatorial candidate here in California, who's now head of the Minneapolis Fed, by the way, and didn't rule out the possibility of a Fed rate hike before the year is over because of the inflation numbers that we got recently, and trying to create this soft landing on this Goldilocks scenario. What about inflation here now, Ben Stein, and the Fed's next move here?
I don't see any signs of the inflation subsiding, but it has to subside. I mean, it's just people cannot live with this rate of inflation. And I say this to you as a man who does a lot of shopping, especially for groceries and some for real estate. And the prices are just absolutely insane. And I have a whole bunch of young people who work for me, quite a surprising number. And when they talk to me about their housing situation, it's heart-rendering. And it's just, I mean, I don't see anything that's going to happen to make it any better. If you're a young person, you are really, as they say, SOL about owning a home, because it's just not going to happen with this level of inflation. And I want to say, I don't blame Mr. What's his name again? Oh, yes, Biden. Mr. Biden for doing this. He wants to keep employment very high. He wants to keep the economy prosperous. And, of course, he's going to be reluctant to really fight inflation. Who would want to give up a position as President of the United States in order to fight inflation for the ordinary working man? Not many people have that kind of courage, and Biden certainly doesn't.
Well, you're to be applauded for pumping up certainly the local economy and going to the gas station of the Stars there in Beverly Hills. Anyone who drives by there can notice the prices, right? And that is they're elevated, and yet you continue to patronize that place as well as other local establishments, which I know everybody appreciates. Any specific places where Ben Stein is putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Ben Stein is trying to get as liquid as he can, because Ben Stein foresees that in the current economic / political environment, he's been blacklisted. That's been made explicit by various lecture bureaus that I used to work with a great deal. I have been blacklisted by many of them for criticizing the leftists and the Democrats. And as I said, I'm not quite sure why they do that, because I criticize the Republicans as well. But anyway, I leave a great deal of money on the table at Mr. Chow. I think both of our favorite restaurants in Beverly Hills, and intend to keep doing that until I can't afford to do it anymore. That is probably the most fun place to eat in America, as far as I'm concerned.
On the line with Ben Stein, and of course, during this conversation, we do get messages. People want to make sure that it's really you, Ben Stein, who gave that famous lecture on trade policy in the 1930s in the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So, is it really you, sir?
Adams, Adamley, Adamowski, Bueller, Fry. Yes, it's me, Frank. It's me. I'll see you walking down the aisle at the pavilions.
Yes, there's no doubt it is the one and only Ben Stein for Frank and Stein Conversation. It has happened. Ben Stein, thank you very much for coming to the line here this afternoon.
A stone honor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Summer's coming, believe it or not. The days getting longer, weather warmer, swarms of tourists crowding our streets and freeways, and the pace may be slower, but the traffic is heavier. You might be traveling, but with travel, you're driving in an unfamiliar place, and while you're having fun in paradise, unfortunately, accidents can happen. Now, if you've been hurt in an accident at home or away from home, don't let it ruin your trip or your summer. Call the compassionate team at Fielding Law Firm. Clark Fielding understands the disruption and frustration that comes of being injured in an accident that was not your fault. Clark is dedicated to getting you the justice and compensation you deserve. Whether it's a car accident, slip, trip, fall, dog bite, or any kind of personal injury, Fielding Law is here to fight for you. Clark Fielding and his team of legal sharks at Fielding Law will help carry the burden so you can focus on recovery. You'll be treated like family. Fielding Law is a local firm that is familiar with our highways and troubled spots. Clark lives right here, too. Don't let the summer be overshadowed by an accident. Call Fielding Law today for a free consultation so you can focus on getting back to enjoying life under the sun. 833-88-SHARK. That's 833-88-SHARK. Your path to brighter days ahead. ClarkTheSharkLaw.com. 790 KBC welcomes Howard Jones and ABC with Haircut 100 to the YouTube Theater coming up on August 20th. Live Nation's Concert Week is here with $25 tickets over 5,000 shows. Tickets are on sale now through May 14th at Ticketmaster.com. Right now, yep, you guessed it, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show if you're caller 9. Call right now, 1-888-795-2222. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KBC. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of more than 300 points, up 331 at the bell at 39,388, just shy of its all-time high. The S&P 500 of 26 at 5,214, and the NASDAQ of 43 at 16,346. The yield in the 10-year note now 4.46%. Bitcoin up about 700 at 63,176. Ethereum of 31 at 3,051, and Doge at the moment at 15 cents. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. With me now, prominent Los Angeles attorney Richard Sandler, who also is vice president of the Milken Family Foundation, also author of the book Witness to a Prosecution, speaking to me here at the Milken Institute Global Conference. Mr. Sandler, thank you very much for joining me here, and folks here had a chance to hear more about your very informative book called A Witness to a Prosecution, The Myth of Michael Milken. Tell us about the book.
Well, the book tells a true story of what happened to Michael Milken. The people at this conference see this amazing individual who's accomplished so much, has given back so much to the world, and don't realize that what he went through some 40 years ago was the same human being, same man with a family, caring about the world, who got caught up in a very unfair process. And I think it's time that the true story be told. So I was the witness. I represented at the time. I know exactly what happened. And I have tried very hard to create a factual record of exactly what happened, how it happened, and why it happened.
Speaking to Richard Sandler, the author of Witness to a Prosecution. And Mr. Sandler, tell us about your experience back in those days. For those who don't recall, I happen to have been on the Nightly Business Report back in those days, filling in for Paul Kangas. I remember it was a big story back in the 80s when this story happened. Maybe you can tell the audience what happened back then.
So I'll try to summarize the entire book here in about a minute and a half, but Mike Milken had been very, very successful in finance. He had created a business within a business called the high-yield security business. Through his hard work and his study and his research, he had determined that companies that couldn't get high ratings from rating agencies, that were young, had entrepreneurial leadership and management, were good investments. He did his research, he worked hard, he met the people, and he concluded what companies to invest in, and his theories proved to true. And it became a good investment. So for the first time ever, Drexel Burnham, the firm he worked for, started giving original issue financing to new, young entrepreneurial companies. And some of those companies that we've heard of today were Turner Broadcasting and CNN, were Wynn Resorts, it was then called Golden Nugget, MCI Communications, McCaw Cellular, AMC Theaters, U.S. Homes, Toys R Us, Hasbro Toys, John Malone and Telecommunications. I mean, all these companies and industries were able to get financing earlier than they otherwise would have because of what Mike created. It made him a disruptor on Wall Street, somewhat unpopular on Wall Street, but also very well known and very, very successful. But Mike was very media shy, so people didn't really understand who he was, but they understood that he was a very successful, which made him an attractive target if something happened, as it did, that would result in a prosecutor bringing him within their sights.
And indeed, that prosecutor at the time was none other than Rudolph Giuliani, the federal prosecutor back in those days. And tell us about that component of the prosecution.
So Mr. Giuliani was becoming very well known at the time for prosecuting people of note. Started out by prosecuting people in the mafia, then people in business. And when this case came across his desk and he saw how much publicity it got, what happened was Mike had done business, as many had.
Named one of the best personal finance podcasts, The Stacking Benjamin Show with Joe and his friends makes financial literacy fun.
Let's hear another success story. This one comes to us from Stacker Derek.
You guys are the best, and it's because of you I now understand retirement accounts, money in general, and how poorly the guests are treated when they show up. I really don't know where I would be without you. Thank you for $1,500, and here's to another $1,500 if Doug can survive that long without pay.
Find out more by searching the Stacking Benjamins podcast wherever you listen.
With a guy named Ivan Boesky, who was the number one arbitrager at the time. Mr. Boesky made a deal with the government with respect to an insider trading situation, and was given a lighter sentence because he told the government that he could help them make cases against others. And the number one case, the one that got the most publicity, was Michael Milken. And so we went through a process. I learned, being very naive at the time, that the criminal process is a very, very slanted process towards the government. The prosecutors have all the rights. They have the ability to get witnesses in front of a grand jury, to get documents, to send out subpoenas, and the person under investigation has no rights to do anything. And that a prosecutor's job is to use that power to see that justice is done, meaning that the guilty get convicted and the innocent go free. Unfortunately, as we learned in a high-profile case, the prosecutor decides before they even look at the file that a person is guilty, and they use that power to prove that person guilty. It's not a fair process if a person is innocent, as was the case with Mike, and that's what we faced, and that's what I wrote about.
On the air with Richard Sandler, and in addition to the legal struggles he sustained back then, also the health struggles. He was diagnosed with terminal cancer, as he told us on this program, and wrote the book Faster Cures in recent years. Tell us about that, and indeed overcoming so many difficulties.
So Mike went through this, incredible, difficult process. Finally decided, in the best interest of his family, with all the pressures that were being brought up him, to plead to things that had never been the subject of prosecution before, but it ended the ordeal. And he did go to prison for a couple of years, again, as we go through in detail in the book, exactly how it happened and what was involved. He comes out finally, reunited with his family, and almost immediately gets diagnosed with prostate cancer and is told that he has 15 months to live. And he goes to work, as he does everything he does in life, to try to make the area more productive, better. He formed the Prostate Cancer Foundation because very little research was being done at the time, and since then has totally revolutionized the way cancer research is done. There are millions of men walking around today because of the work of the Prostate Cancer Foundation and the money it's raised and the research that's been done by so many talented scientists and doctors. And fortunately, Mike got lucky and went into remission. And that's why we're at this conference today with probably 5,000 people.
This in itself is a tremendous achievement to bring the world together like this. Maybe you can tell us about how this all came about originally, and then, of course, his enormous philanthropy over the years, which has been stellar.
So Mike's philanthropy started back when he was in his 30s, long before these cases started. In fact, the judge that sentenced him made reference to the fact of how unusual he was, not only giving money, but giving time to the less advantaged parts of our community. The Milken Institute was actually started, before Mike pled and all that time. And Mike has used the Milken Institute and other foundations which he's involved in to try to improve the human condition. And the Institute has grown over time, addressing the most important issues that face our society, whether they relate to health, education, finance, entrepreneurship, and people are interested in Mike's ideas. They always have been. He's available, and through that he has built this institution to a point where it's at today, where we have over 100 employees worldwide and have this amazing conference every year where we bring CEOs of major companies, heads of state, former heads of state, entrepreneurs, investors, everybody coming to interact with each other for 3 days at our global conference.
It is said that eagles don't normally flock. When it does happen, it's something very special. We're certainly seeing this here again. And now, fast forward to recent times, he's been exonerated, right, through the presidential pardon.
He did get a presidential pardon a couple years ago from President Trump, acknowledging in the pardon and in the press release that they released that the charges against Mike were novel, were somewhat unusual, but mainly, most importantly, recognizing the amazing contributions he's made throughout his career, not only to healthcare and education, but to society in general.
What is the biggest myth you'd like to explode here about Michael Milken?
That Michael actually did something really wrong and has now turned his life around. Mike's the same person today he was back then, trying to make the world better and society better. He was caught up in a system in which to put an end to it for the benefit of his family and probably himself also. He agreed to plead to some novel regulatory violations which had never been subject of criminal prosecution, and they're described in detail in the book so people could read it and decide for themselves. But that's the myth. The myth is that he did something, he was involved in something like insider trading, which he never was involved in, and that he's turned his life around. But he's the same person doing the same kind of work, and what he was finally convicted of because of his plea, were not serious crimes. They were regulatory violations that had not been the subject of criminal prosecution before.
And now he's being celebrated, of course, as a pioneer in the world of finance and philanthropy as well, having been honored recently by the United Hatzalah group here in Century City, where he also contributed substantially to that cause. His philanthropy has been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I think, it's one of the things he just goes about doing because that's who he is. He doesn't really look for any kind of attention for it. He's not looking for congratulations. He was honored by that group and agreed to give his name because he believed in the group. He believed in the work they were doing and felt if it would help them that he was willing to do that. He actually normally shies away from that. The same person that shied away from publicity 40 years ago is out there more today because he thinks it's good for the causes he cares about. But he's somewhat media shy that way.
Well, he's been on this program, and we always are elated when that happens, and hopefully connect with him. It's been an honor to speak with you, Richard Sandler, author of the book Witness to a Prosecution, The Myth of Michael Milken. Thank you very much for joining us here, Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
Thank you, Frank. Always good talking to you.
Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Following the Hamas terror attack on Israel, which left at least 1,200 people dead back on October 7th when the Israel-Hamas war began, we've seen a wave of anti-Semitism on display at major universities across the country, including some here in Southern California. A pro-Palestinian encampment has now been set up at Chapman University. And we're watching the situation there very closely, where Jewish students have been intimidated. Joining us live now is Max Wiseman, a business student at Chapman, who's on the board of Students Standing with Israel. Max, thank you very much for taking the call here. And maybe you can tell the folks what's happening there, please.
Absolutely, Frank. I'd like to say first, it was a pleasure meeting you yesterday at the Milken Global Conference in Beverly Hills.
Likewise.
And I'm honored to join you on your show today. As we get into this, over the past couple of weeks, there have been developments on campus by the Students Justice for Palestine. Protests started around campus with these pro-Hamas individuals chanting Intifada and creating signs that call for Intifada. And now, as a Jewish student, listening to these pro-Hamas students call for Intifada, well, that is a very scary place to be in. And being on campus, I feel threatened by these students, as an Intifada is a violent act of opposition by the Palestinian people to the Israeli occupation of the West Bank. However, let's remember that back in 2005, Israel had removed its settlements and military from Gaza and under the plan of disengagement. And when you have these students calling for Intifada, well, there is no occupation in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. And the sad thing is that a lot of these students are misinformed, and unfortunately, they are easily manipulated and brainwashed, and then they perpetuate hate and anti-Semitism throughout the campus.
On the air with Max Wiseman, who's a student at Chapman University. Are you able to go to campus there, and what is the situation when you do try to attend classes?
Absolutely. So about a week and a half ago, an encampment was started on campus with orders to Chapman University to end complicity, total divestment, and financial transparency. And now this encampment had started off with probably 30 people, yet it has now roughly grown to approximately 60 to 70 individuals with these big green tents on campus. And these demands that the Student Justice for Palestine are asking for is to leverage the institution to use their power to call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. However, let's remember that on October 6th, there was a ceasefire deal in place, and Hamas broke that deal and committed the second largest genocide of the Jews since the Holocaust. And when we talk about divestment, demanding Chapman to completely divest our tuition dollars from and cut all ties to Zionist entity and all companies complicit in the occupation of Palestine. Well, when we look at it, divesting dollars from Zionist entities is anti-Semitic, as anti-Zionism means a person who believes in the development and protection of a Jewish nation in what is now Israel. So when you have this group calling for total divestment, well, cutting ties with Zionist entities denies the rights of Jewish students to feel safe and feel comfortable on campus. And as it's been used as a derogatory term to be a Zionist, I take full pride in my Zionism, as I do believe in the development and protection of a Jewish nation state.
And I see the students there have organized, right? And have you brought these concerns to the Chapman University management there, and what's been the response?
Absolutely. So the school has different policies in place, and how they're treating this encampment, if you will, they're treating it as a peaceful demonstration. However, there is nothing peaceful about this demonstration when surrounding the encampment are signs that calls to globalize the Intifada, and then more signs that go on to say there is only one solution, Intifada revolution, and long live the Intifada. When you have this ideology of students who are calling their peers to go against the school and to retaliate, it creates this unsafe environment, especially as a Jew. When I was on campus and I had my Star of David out of my shirt, I was called an ugly Jew to my face. I mean, if we want to talk about blatant anti-Semitism, it doesn't get more blatant than that. So when I talk about my safety, I certainly feel unsafe on campus.
That is horrific. And of course, many graduation ceremonies have been canceled because of these encampments and what's been going on. Are they going to go forward with the ceremony there at Chapman this year?
As of right now, they still plan to have and host the graduation. However, we've seen all around the country at Columbia, at USC, at NYU, that they've had to cancel their graduations because these students in Student Justice for Palestine have not only raided the stage or disrupted the graduations, however, they have also blocked off the areas to attend graduation. And administration has been very complicit, if you will, in this encampment process, and they have taken a very passive stance where the Jewish students feel unheard and unsafe.
So sorry you have to endure this, just trying to go to school there, and thanks for shedding light on what's happening there, Max. We'll keep an open line to you, and we wish you all the best and hope this gets resolved quickly. That is Max Wiseman, business student at Chapman University on the Board of Students Standing with Israel. Live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and I'll be back with more at 4 tomorrow afternoon. Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
What's up, everyone? It's Reality Steve, your number one source for all things Bachelor Nation and reality TV. Every day, I'm giving you the behind-the-scenes juice and your info on all your Bachelor Nation stories, and also interviewing some of your favorite reality stars. My name has been synonymous with spoilers, but I'm so much more than that. Give me a listen.
The Reality Steve Podcast, part of the Believe Network. Just search BLEAV on YouTube or wherever you listen.